All right. So for Sunrise Yin this morning, what I had in mind is a low back and hip class. Hips are sort of the theme for me for this week. So if you would, let me have you start on your back. I recommend for props at least one blanket, a mat, a bolster, and two blocks. And we'll start using the two blocks right away. So I'm going to have you come down onto your back in sort of a bridge setup. When I ask you to lift up, I'd like you to place two blocks under your low back so that the seam of those two blocks at the lowest height comes right at the center of your low back, right at the sacroiliac joint, if you know where that is. All right. So heels maybe close in toward the seat. It's not as critical today as if we were actually doing a bridge. And then lift yourself up, place the blocks under your low back. And then in contrast with how we might do this in a vinyasa formatted class where we continue to engage the feet, go soft in the legs. Just let gravity absorb the weight of your low back, your hips, your body, pressing down into the blocks. Just take a moment, take a few breaths, 3 or 4 breaths, just get present to this moment. Find 1 or 2 of the most provocative points of sensation, the most provocative stimuli you have in your environment this morning. Couple of breaths. And this is a yin class, but we are going to do a gentle movement to start just to mobilize tissues a little bit. So to that end, if you would put a bend in your right knee, draw right knee to right shoulder, interlace both hands on your right shin, and then start to make small circles with that right knee. Left foot on the earth might be nice support for the lower back. You could also choose to lengthen that leg out long. And then change the direction of your circles. And find some stillness. Now we're going to do what I call a supine archer. So on an inhale breath, draw your right knee towards your right shoulder. Maybe it's gently but firmly. And then exhale, press your hands into your shins, taking all the slack out of your arms, like an archer loading the bow. And then inhale, right knee to right shoulder. Exhale, load the bow. Continue flowing through this gentle movement to the cadence of your own breath. So there are about 22 plus muscles associated with the hip complex. And this is a part of the body. It's foundationally important to human movement. Right. So when I lived in northern New Hampshire, when I worked for U.S. Forest Service in northern New Hampshire, I took rock climbing lessons. And I worked with this professional guide. Come to an apparent pause here, and then straighten your right leg, solely your right foot parallel to the ceiling, but maybe a generous bend in the right knee. Interlace both hands on the back of the right thigh. And you can stay right here or start to draw that right knee any amount closer towards your chin. And in these climbing lessons, every time I got stuck, I'd be looking up. I'd be looking for handholds. And Pete, this guy, they used to call him Handsome Pete, but this rock climbing guide that I was working with would say, no, don't look up, look down. It's not your arms, it's your feet. You got to move your hips. You got to do something different with your hips. All right, to your left arm out to the side. Right hand stays behind the right thigh, but let gravity lower the pinky edge blade of your right foot closer down to the earth, just to the point where that left hip starts to lift up. So for most bodies, that pinky edge blade's not going to come all the way down to the earth. It's not that that's impossible. It just would be pretty unusual. And he was always right. So if I'd start to shift my attention down and find a foothold and move my hips, then I could scramble up the rocks a little higher. I took Latin dance lessons for about 1.5 years, salsa and bachata. And most of the cueing that I got from in these private lessons related to my hips. Do something different with the hips. Draw the sole of your right foot back up parallel to the ceiling. Change the grip, left hand behind your right thigh. Take the webbing between your right thumb and right index finger, feed it into your right hip crease. And then as you draw the left heel across the center line of your body, press the right hand forward and down toward the top edge of your mat, creating a little bit of a vacuum in that hip socket. Drawing the femur ever so slightly out of the acetabulum, not literally, but as if you could. Right, so in Latin dance lessons and salsa and bachata, hips are really important. And if you've seen someone dance in one of those styles or a cumbia or something like that, like super hip intensive. When someone does it well, it's so beautiful and so graceful. All right, come back up to center, release the right hand. One more time, draw your right knee to your right shoulder, give it a gentle little tug, and then release the sole of your right foot down to the earth. Put a bend in your left knee to left shoulder, and we'll change sides, interlacing the hands on the left shin, small circles, maybe lengthening the right leg out. I trained and competed in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for about 10 years. And toward the end of my jiu-jitsu career, before my back really required that, like if I wanted to keep moving well in the rest of my life, there's no more jiu-jitsu. Change the direction of your circles. But I enjoyed a lot of success in the competition. And same thing, every time I got stuck, when I was working with an opponent in jiu-jitsu in competition, I would hear my coach screaming, hips, hips, hips. So these are such an important part of the body and are so important for movement. But I have to confess, even after my initial training as a yoga teacher, I didn't have a great understanding of the anatomy or really the importance of the hips. And come back to stillness. Straighten that left leg, interlace your hands on the back of the left thigh, and then maybe draw that left knee any amount closer to your left shoulder. Until I got a full tear in the labrum, what serves as cartilage in the acetabulum of the hip socket. I got a full tear in the labrum of my left hip. And it hurt almost all the time. Like anything related to movement really became pretty painful. And then during the process of my hip replacement and the recovery, I had this opportunity to dive much deeper into my understanding of the hip, both for movement, but also like maintaining healthful movement. So of the 6 basic movements of the healthy hip: flexion, extension, adduction, abduction, lateral rotation, and medial rotation, we're going to try to work through all of those today. We may find a little bit of a miss on one of them, but we'll see how that goes. All right, start to lower that left foot, pinky edge blade of the left foot off to the earth, left hand supporting behind the left thigh. Now I'm limited here by the wall, but in your case, if you can, lower the pinky edge blade as close down to the earth as you can. Start lifting the sole of your left foot back up parallel to the ceiling. Change the grip with your hands. Right hand behind your left thigh, webbing between your left thumb and index finger, feet into your left hip crease. Draw that left heel across the center line of your body. So here we have hip adduction. As we draw the left hip toward the right. Inhale as you draw the sole of your left foot closer up toward the ceiling. Exhale, one more bend in that left knee, interlace the hands, give it one last little gentle tug. Deep hip flexion of the left hip as we draw the left knee to the left shoulder. And then release your left foot down to the earth. Join it next to your right. Lift up and remove the blocks. And then you can find, if you would, a full body stretch. Reaching your arms long over your head, reaching your legs long as well. And then we're going to go from here into banana asana. So start to walk your feet off to the right. Walk your hands off to the right as well. Until the point where your left hip and left shoulder start to lift up. And unless you're not getting enough sensation there, that's probably a good stopping point. Now, if you need more sensation, you could open more up to the left, but I'd encourage you to pat up under the lifted hip and shoulder with a blanket. Before the recording about quadratus lamborum, the QL. And for me, this is one of the poses today that when I'm feeling jammed up, over-engaged in one of my QLs and one side over the other, this is one of the shapes that really can give me a lot of relief from that. So just check in with your body. Notice your current level of sensation. So nothing wrong with where we are right now. You could stay right here. This is meaningful, productive work. If your body wants more, you could cross that left ankle over your right. You could walk the legs further over to your left, or you might take a couple of the fingers in your right hand, loop them around your left wrist, and just draw that left wrist further over to your right. So one of the poses today tends to be a culprit that is a lot of sensation for the hip AB abductors. And people sometimes have a really strong emotional response to the pose, in part because the emotions may be stored in the hips, but definitely because of the high level of sensation. So typically in our yin practice, there's no specific breath that's prescribed, right? It's just a comfortable, natural breath. But I am gonna offer you the invitation to experiment with a little bit of a different approach to the breath in this one shape because of that high level of sensation. Release your left ankle from over your right. Release your left wrist. Come back into center to reset, finding a full body stretch. Maybe noticing a difference in the sense of the connective tissues on either side of the body. And then changing sides, walking your feet off to the right, or sorry, to the left rather than sorry, surprise, right? And then walk your hands off to the left as well. I don't know if I shared this with you already. My Ayurveda coach, Kate Stillman, says we apologize too much. We apologize for things that aren't really wrong. It's just simple little mistakes. Like we say right rather than left, and we say sorry. She says to get out of this habit, one kind of fun and interesting way that we can experiment with that is to start substituting the word surprise for sorry. So if we say right rather than left, we say left and then surprise, which I thought was kind of cute. Invitation to investigate the level of sensation that you have right now, and then either change nothing or cross your right ankle over your left, loop your left hand around your right wrist, drag that right arm further over to the left. Release your right ankle, release your right wrist, come back to center, reset in another full body stretch. And I'm going to ask you to roll onto your belly, but once we roll, I'd like you to have a block close to the top edge of your mat. So it might make sense to stage that before we roll, but then just use good body mechanics. Roll over onto your belly. And then right away, set up into Sphinx pose with a block, maybe at the highest setting in between your thumbs or your wrists. Shoulders floating over the wrists, legs reaching and extending long behind you. And then relax everything. Maybe flip the palms up toward the stars for now. And I'm going to choose to release my forehead down to a block. That's certainly not compulsory. But if you notice that you're holding on to some muscular engagement that you don't need, such as holding the head up, you could choose to release it down to some support. If your body wants more, turn your fingers out wide, palms facing down toward the earth, seal pose. Press into your hands, lift the elbows up off the earth. Maybe choose to walk the heels of the hands closer in toward the waist. And then same thing, process of checking in with your body. Notice if you're holding on someplace, if you picked up some gripping in the glutes maybe, and see if you can release that and let that go. And if you chose seal, start to lower your forearms down to the earth. You slide the block out of the way for now. Find any resting shape on your belly. So I'm going to choose today a half frog. My arms goal posted to the side, elbows in line with my shoulders, fingers pointing up past the top edge of my mat. And then because my gaze is shifted over to the left, I'm going to lift my left knee up in the general direction of my left elbow. And just let gravity gently draw that left hip open toward the earth. Start to lift yourself back up, maybe into a tabletop for now. But I'd like you to grab your bolster, sit onto your right hip, bring your right shin parallel with the top edge of your mat. Put a generous bend in that left knee parallel with the left edge of your mat. And whatever you can do to whatever degree possible to keep head floating over shoulders, over hips. You'll notice my body cants over to the right here. That's super natural, super common. So I'm just going to place my right hand on my bolster. And notice the actions with the hip here. We have lateral rotation of the right hip, medial rotation of the left hip. And from here, I'm just letting gravity draw my hips down toward the earth. And a couple of options when we add sensation, but we're going to try to get back into the QL muscles here with the option of a twisted deer. Right. Notice your current level of sensation. And you could stay right here. This would be meaningful, productive work the whole time as gravity draws the hips down toward earth. You could, it wouldn't be wrong to fold forward over that right shin. But what I'm going to choose to do, because of the low back angle of this class today, it's a hip and low back blended class, is walk my hands off to the right and then lower my torso down. For me, onto this bolster will be nice, but for some bodies, your body might come all the way down to the mat comfortably and naturally, and that's good too. And we still have the action of the lateral rotation of the right hip, medial rotation of the left hip, but there's sort of a sensation for me in this shape. There's a sensation distraction, and where the sensation really is noticeable for me here is back in that QL muscle, and I feel like opposing pulls in opposite directions of the low back. Start to walk yourself up. Lift yourself out of this shape. It's not the only way to come out of this, but a really gentle way I found is if I draw the left knee forward toward my right heel, it gives me enough slack to unwind that leg. And then if you would, make your way down onto your back. Take the pinky edge blade of your left foot, hook it on the outside of your right thigh. And then if you look between the legs, notice this little triangle we created. Thread your right hand into that triangle, interlace both hands on the back of your left leg. And I would prefer, if you can, to release your whole spinal column down on the mat. And there is a yang action here of the arms drawing the left knee in towards your chest. And you could experiment, maybe press that right knee forward, which we would in vinyasa. Here in this yin version, you could choose to not do that too. But we talked about glute medius earlier, which is like, it's really painful for lots of people. If you wanted to get into glute medius, if you roll over onto your left hip point a little bit, ooh, there's a sweet spot that really, for me, if I hit just the right spot, I can isolate that gluteus medius a little bit. So when we do this in vinyasa, I would really advocate bringing the feet to life. But here, unless you're getting knee pain in that right knee, you can let the feet go nice and soft. But if you're getting any kind of like sharp, concentrated pain in that right knee, the first thing I would try would be kind of breaking that yin rule and flexing the toes on that right foot. And that may help alleviate some of that pain. So I didn't mention this earlier, but here again, we have lateral rotation of the right hip and flexion of the left hip. You can release your left foot down to the earth, release your left leg. Pinky edge blade of your right foot, you can drop down toward the earth. And then make your way back up onto your seat. We're going to set up for deer on the second side. So sit down onto your left hip, left shin parallel with the top edge of your mat. Big generous bend in your right knee, right shin parallel to the right hand edge of your mat. Maybe bolster staged off to the left side. So now lateral rotation of the left hip, medial rotation of the right. And maybe using a prop, maybe a block or maybe your bolster to try to keep as much of the body weight possible centered over the hips, tractioning them down toward the earth. All right, so you can stay right here, or maybe walk your hands off to the left. Maybe start to lower your torso down onto some kind of support, a bolster or the mat. Begin to walk your hands up under your shoulders. Maybe sliding your bolster out of the way. And then right knee toward left ankle. Ooh, lots of slack. Come down onto your back, and we'll thread the needle on the second side. So now hook pinky edge blade of your left foot on the outside of your right thigh. Thread your left hand into our triangle. Interlace both hands on the back of your right thigh. Let the feet go nice and soft unless you get knee pain in that left knee. And then maybe if you wanted to get into the glute medius, roll onto your right hip point. Ooh, until that sweet spot tells you found it. So just like the other side, we've just changed the sides here. So we have lateral hip rotation in the left hip and flexion of the right hip. So if you come back to center, you can release your right leg, lower your right foot down to the earth, release your left leg, and then any resting shape on your belly. Now for me, since I did the last resting shape we did, I did a half frog. I'm just going to take the other side with my left cheek resting on the earth and my right knee lifted in the general direction of my right elbow. But that's one of many, many options. So if you chose the half frog, hip AB abduction, I had fits remembering which is which. I just couldn't keep it straight. Which one is adduction, which one is abduction? And then a teacher told me if you draw the legs into the middle like you were adding them together, that's adduction. And if you draw one leg apart as if you were abducting it, as if it was being abducted by aliens, that's abduction. It's super creepy, but also really helped me to remember it. It worked out really well as a mnemonic tool. So start to lift yourself up, make your way into a tabletop shape, grab a bolster. So I'm going to demonstrate this from two different positions. I'll be changing my orientation midstream. But to start, from tabletop, maybe a third of the bolster down below the level of your wrists. And then turn your feet out to the outside. And start to walk your knees out wide. And as you walk the knees out wide, walk the ankles out in line. So from head to toe, the knees and the ankles are all in one straight line. And then from side to side, this is where you can hold what you got. I'm just going to change positions for demonstration purposes. There's a tendency the hips are going to want to creep forward. You can keep hips and knees in line from side to side. And then maybe lower down onto the bolster. So it's not wrong to do this on the forearm, but it changes what we're doing with the shape. I would prefer to see you relax into something. But that's my preference, and this is your practice. So this is the one where, because of the pretty intense engagement of the hip AB abductors, this is really uncomfortable for a lot of people. So we can experiment with this other breath if you're inclined to. So I'm going to choose to do it, but you can choose to do it or not. But in yoga body, in Lucas Rockwood's system, he calls this whiskey breath. It's down regulating in the central nervous system. So what it'll be, I'll describe it first and then we can start it. It's a 4-count inhale through the nose and then an 8-count exhale through the mouth, making a ha sound. So if you'll exhale out all your breath and then inhale through your nose for 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale through your mouth with a ha sound for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And if that's working for you, you could maintain this breath. This is down regulating in the central nervous system. And in the one of the areas where Lucas applies this, he's got this system. He used to call it gravity yoga. Now he calls it flexibility training. but it's pretty intense, deep stretching at a high sensation level. And at that highest sensation level, for most of us, we tend to fall into a fight or flight response, central nervous system response. It's a sympathetic nervous system response. And this particular breath work is really effective for countering that, triggering a parasympathetic nervous system response, which is a nervous system hack. It allows us, one, sometimes to go a little deeper into the pose than we may have, but certainly to stay into poses where otherwise we might otherwise choose to bail out, either literally, physically, or mentally and emotionally. Going to start to come out of this. So if you would, rather than muscling out, rock the crown of your head forward until your hips start to lower down toward the earth. And then from there, we can draw the knees in together. And we've had a lot of transitions front and back this practice. We got one more. If you would come onto your back. And we're going to take a brief twisted root, brief only in the context of yin. But cross your right knee over your left. So we have hip AD adduction of both hips. Tee the arms out to the side. Walk your hips over to the right. And then drop your knees over to the left. And you can start to lift your knees back up to center. Unwind the legs, and then we'll wind them up in the opposite direction. Left knee wraps over your right. Hip AD adduction again. Walk your hips over to the left. Drop your knees off to the right. All right, let's start to lift your knees back up to center. Unwind your legs, and from here, make your way into any final resting shape. Your seat, your belly, your back, or your side. I'm going to choose a restorative bridge today, but you could take anything that you like that allows you to balance these two qualities of relaxation and alertness. Invitation to begin to draw some deeper breaths and bring your body back to life after this time you've taken to rest. And then maybe start to make some small movements, reanimating your body, maybe wiggling your fingers or your toes or drawing your chin from shoulder to shoulder. And if your body wants more movement, invitation to go even larger, rotating your hands at the wrists, your feet at the ankles, or even taking a full body stretch. And you always have the option to close out the practice in your final resting shape. But if you're choosing otherwise today, if you would roll over onto either side into a fetal position. Take a few moments Check in, notice how you're feeling. In particular, notice the area around your hips. And just check in, notice, did you create some space and openness for yourself there in the work that we did? Check in with the quality of your mental state. Notice, did you create some space and openness for yourself there? Check in with the quality of your emotional state. Were you able to create some space and some openness for yourself there? And then press yourself up into a seated position with your legs crossed, eyes open or closed, hands anywhere that you like. Thank you so much for moving and breathing with me today. I appreciate your energy, your breath, and your practice. Invitation to draw your thumbs to the space between your eyebrows. Blessings to you and your family. And that concludes our practice for this morning. I'm going to stop our recording real quick.